Standing against the dollar means standing directly against the US, standing against a superpower and a nuclear power. Saddam Hussein had refused to use the dollar. This step by America put a huge jackpot in Saudi Arabia. But because of this, Saddam Hussein was overthrown and hanged. The US imposed so many sanctions on Iran, this plan also stopped at the same time. But a civil war was started in their country, and the traitor was overthrown. And from here, the US's maneuvering started. Because of this, not only Russia was sanctioned. Everyone else also suffered a lot, and this is the reason why anyone thinks 10 times before taking a fight with the US. Look, there are so many superpowers in the world. But why was the dollar made a global currency instead of everyone else's currency? What was the compulsion of other countries that the US dollar had to be made a global currency? No matter how big the superpower is, even if it is Russia, if the US imposes sanctions, why does the economy of that country stand on the ground overnight? And why is it only about US sanctions? Why is it not about other countries like Nepal, Sri Lanka, South Africa? If other countries have imposed sanctions, why doesn't it matter? What is the real reason behind the US weaponizing the dollar and keeping other countries in check? And all these things I am explaining to you without understanding the economics of the US dollar, which is going on in the whole world. It is very difficult to understand geopolitics. But once you understand this thing, you will be able to tell by looking at the trade of only two countries, that how are their relations. So in this video, we will discuss everything in this simple language. So it was thousands of years ago, and at that time there was no currency. At that time, people used to do a barter system. That is, if someone has tomatoes, he needs rice. So the one who has rice, he gave the tomato and took the rice. In the same way, people used to exchange goods and services according to their needs at that time. So now what happens is that the method they were using, the barter system, it was okay to trade tomatoes, rice, all these things. After some time, they used to go bad. So people had a lot of trouble trading for the long term, but after some time, people came up with a solution for this too. They started dealing in such things that were not bad, like valuable metals, gold, silver, copper, started trading in this. So what happened after this was that you kept it carefully and keep it for as long as you want. It won't go bad. So people used to keep it carefully and according to their needs, they used to give it and take it back. And what did Lydia do in this? She made gold, silver, all these coins, so that people can trade easily. So this step that Lydia took, after this, gold, silver, their coins, started coming in circulation. Now it was okay up to this point, but there were some problems in this too, like when people used to travel on a long route and had to do a very big trade. Then this gold and silver used to be very heavy. Managing them, saving them from theft on the way, and transporting them properly, there were problems in this. So along with time, people started finding solutions to this problem too. Suppose someone had to go to California from New York with gold. So there was a trader in New York. People used to look for him and used to tell him that we don't want to travel with so much gold. You keep our gold with you. When we reach California, then you tell your well-known trader in California, he will give us the same amount of gold when we reach there, and you can take whatever you get. So what used to happen in such cases that the trader in New York would keep the gold and put a stamp and sign on a paper and give it to you. Then you used to take that paper and reach California, and after reaching California, the paper on which the trader had put a stamp and sign, you show it to the trader in California and take the gold from there. The worry of the road, the worry of gold and silver, used to end with this. The reference work that you would have heard of today is also based on this old system. And the paper that used to be given with the stamp and sign, instead of gold later on, this currency was made. Even today, when you see it written on a dollar, that I promise to give this amount to James, this is what it is. Now, you might have a question, that if there is a $20, can't it be converted to gold? You can buy it, whatever date it is, but it is not convertible. Now, you will understand why this happened. So, at that particular time, people were trading like this, but the whole system was unorganized. One person was trusting another person and working. So, there were a lot of loopholes in this. Slowly, attention was given to organizing this. And first of all, in the year 1154, there was a man in China, Wenyan Liang. He, along with the authority of China, implemented this whole system in an organized way. What did he do? He made a bank for this same work in China. People used to go to the bank in China, used to deposit their gold, and used to get a bank note in return. So, when this started happening, the people who used to trade, their tension was relieved. They didn't have to with gold. They knew that they had a banknote. Whenever they wanted, they could go to the bank and take their gold. They just had to trade in the banknote. So at that time, this type of trade started. This is the note that was used at that time. Now, after this, in the 13th century, from Europe to Marco Polo to China. And there, this whole system of notes was going on. Looking at this, they were very impressed. They came back to Europe and implemented this paper system in Europe as well. Now, people started trading in paper currency in Europe as well. Slowly, paper currency started being used in other places as well. People kept their gold, silver in the bank with tension and were trading in paper currency. And in Europe, they named their currency pound sterling. Everything was predefined in this, that if there is 1 sterling, how much gold will you get in return? Like, at that time, I was getting 7.3 grams of gold in 1 sterling. Meaning, if you have 150 pounds of sterling in your pocket, you are carrying more than 1 kilogram of gold in your pocket. That too, with no tension. This is the year-wise chart of how much sterling used to give in which year. So, similarly, other countries also made their system in their country. Now, trade was happening, but the countries were not trading with each other. So, this thing was brought internationally as well. When one country was trading with another country, the same paper currency was used there as well. Countries started trading at an international level, like Chinese used to give their yuan to Europe, and Europeans used to give their pound sterling to China. And no country used to have any tension because the people who used to trade with each other at the end, they used to get gold in return. And this whole system of trade became so easy that the trade of the whole world increased very fast. So, basically, all the trade that was happening, national trade and international trade, was happening in gold only. But a piece of paper was reflecting it, which was named as currency. But any country could print the same amount of currency as it had gold, which was called the gold standard. So it means that if you want to buy more things from outside, then you should have currency. And you can print as you have gold. So, the country which has more gold has more resources. So, even if you do the opposite, the country which produces more goods and resources will have more currency. It means that we'll have more gold. Now, after this, in the starting of the 19th century, the UK was producing the most resources, and it was sending different things to the world. It had more currency, which means that more gold was collected. The gold stores of the UK started increasing, and the currency of the UK, sterling, started increasing comparatively, compared to, and in the whole world, pound, sterling was the most. People started trading in this. Like in today's US dollar, at that time, pound sterling was the most used. 60% of the world's trade was in pound sterling. and some countries started keeping pound sterling instead of, because compared to gold, keeping paper currency, making its reserve, was easier. And after this, the year starts in 1913. This was the time when all the chronology starts changing, and the US dollar. And the reason was the start of the First World War. This was the time when the condition of the UK was very bad. Because of war and arms, 7.8 billion pounds of debt comes to the UK. And this was not a small amount. According to that time, this was a very big amount from the US. 25% of GDP was in debt. The gold reserve was completely over. And where they were supplying resources all over, it started to go wrong here. They had to import from other. In the First World War, the US was neutral in the First World. The US was making money but it that much ahead, because the US did not have central banks and there were many restrictions. But in this war, they filled their gold reserves and made central banks in their reserves, established themselves in the world economy. But this was just the future was better for the today. The US is not the biggest exporter. In fact, the US outsources a lot of services especially in the tech sector. Second World War starts, and in this war, US sells more weapons, and due to this, US had collected most of the gold in the whole world. See this graph. At that time, 70% of the gold in the whole world was with the US. 22,000 tons of gold was with the US, and all of them had the same reason that at this particular time, US exported the most. It got a lot of opportunities to export. The US took advantage of this, and the pound sterling, which was ruling the whole world, was now replaced by the US dollar. And when all these things were happening, Germany also gave another blow to the pound sterling. What Germany did was that UK's sterling, which was dominant in the whole world, to destroy it, Germany started making fake notes of sterling pound and putting them in the market, so that all the countries and people lost faith in this currency, and people should also remove the reserves of sterling pound. At that time, Germany was producing 5 lakh fake notes in a month and putting them in the market. Due to this, the UK suffered a huge loss. It could not see any solution, and this whole situation was going on. The benefit went to the US dollar, and from here, the US's arbitrariness starts. The Second World War ends. All the countries that were Britain, Germany, Soviet Union, France were completely destroyed. There was only one US which was in good condition. The rest, everyone's condition was bad. The gold of the whole world had come to the US. The financial system of the whole world had completely collapsed. Now the US had more money and more gold, but after the Second World War, the European countries and the condition of Japan was very bad. They were in great need of food, grains, and fuel, and they were trying to import from other countries. Now they neither had currency nor gold. And the US was afraid that they would start the barter system. Again, the financial system of the whole world will get ruined, and the advantage of the US dollar, which it is leading in, will end. So, to deal with all these things in the year 1944, 700 representatives from 44 countries gathered in the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, within the US, to find a solution to this problem. And the only purpose of this entire meeting was to create a new financial system so that the situation can be improved. Now, in this meeting, US says that this financial problem has arisen in the whole world. No trade is being done. Everyone's economy has completely collapsed. Whatever gold is there, it is completely short within the other countries. So there is only one solution for this, that all of you do one thing. You do all your deals in US dollars instead of your own currency, and we take a pledge and guarantee that 1 ounce of gold, i.e., 28.3 grams of gold. In exchange, we will give $35, which means that anyone from the whole world can buy an ounce of gold anytime by paying $35. We have enough gold, which means that the countries which earlier used to back their currency with gold should now back it with US dollars, and the US dollar will be backed by gold. And the second thing is that in this meeting, the US and all the other countries together created the World Bank and IMF, International Monetary Fund, and said that the countries which have been ruined in the war can rebuild themselves, for which IMF and World Bank will give loan. But in this also they said that be returned. It will have to be returned in dollars. And not only this, the US made a plan which was called Marshall Plan. In this, what US did was to reconstruct the countries of Europe. The US gave $13.3 billion in US dollars. If you compare it with today's date, then about $173 billion loan was given, and after giving this loan, US said that now you have Monwi in dollars. You can use these dollars to purchase resources from us, reconstruct your country, rebuild it. What you are seeing is the loan that was given in dollars. Even today, you must have read in the news that country issue bonds denominated in US dollars to be repaid in 10 years, which means that if you have taken a loan in dollars, you will have to repay it in dollars only, and within this time. US did not think of short term. US thought of long term. It knows that all the countries need loans. They will take a loan, and the US is very desperate to take advantage of this opportunity. The US wanted to use the US dollar all over the world. Within the entire financial system of the world, the US dollar should be there and no other currency. It wanted to circulate only the US dollar. Because it had a lot of advantages, and what were the advantages, you will know further. Now you can say one thing here, that all the countries except US were so stupid or so easily. They was agreeing that it was also possible that they could gradually rebuild themselves, and the gold that is there is also produced, so they would collect it and gradually expand their country. Why would they accept US's words? Then the gold was produced mostly in two places in the whole world. One was South Africa and the other was the Soviet Union, and these were the two gold-producing countries. They had very bad relations with the other European countries. They didn't want them to produce gold and buy from them and benefit them. Hence, they silently accepted whatever US said and the loan methods given. And it is also true that the US has helped a lot in rebuilding Europe. Therefore, you will see that their relations till date have been very good, and suppose that even if the other countries wanted not to accept what the US is saying, then they too did not have any special option. What am I trying to say? Let me explain it with an example. Suppose Japan is in great need of grain. It talked to Sri Lanka and asked them to give us grain. Now, Japan, after taking grain from Sri Lanka, has its own currency, which is yen. If you give him the money, then what will Sri Lanka do with the money that Japan is giving for its currency? Because the rest of the countries will not take this Japanese currency. But yes, if in this deal, Sri Lanka comes to know that Japan is giving US currency instead of its own, then it will happily take it because it knows that if I pick up this US dollar and give it to the US, I will get gold in return. So this was the reason that in an unset communication in the whole world, despite not wanting, the US dollar was in circulation, and at that time the rest of the countries did not trust each other's currency. Except the US dollar, it was the only reason that they knew that they would get gold in exchange of the US dollar. Using the US dollar had become a compulsion for the rest of the countries. Just like it is a compulsion in today's time, it had become a compulsion at that time also, and this was the reason why the US was saying what the rest of the countries were saying. From loans to trade, everything started to be used in dollars. Now, the US does not stop here either. The US knew that the importance of the US dollar. If it continues to operate in this manner, it will not last long. It had also seen the condition of pound sterling, so the US did not at all want the condition of US dollar to be like that of pound sterling. So all these things were going on. After this, the US played another masterstroke when all these things were going on. At the same time, their companies, which were the US and Europe, were extracting and trading oil all over the world, So all the technology from finding the oil to extracting it was the companies of Europe and the US. The Arab countries had oil, but the technology to find it and then extract it, to sell it in the open market and making profit wasn't their idea. So from here, America makes the next move. American companies reach out to Saudi and help them in extracting oil. This step of America gives Saudi a huge jackpot. A huge oil field comes out in Saudi, and this oil field in this entire process. What U.S. companies do is to extract is they make bases inside Saudi Arabia, and extracting it using technology and sending it to the outside market is the entire process. Now, from here, Saudi had two things in front of it. First, it needed the help of US to extract the oil, its technology, and second thing, it also needed the security of US. Actually, when the World War was going on, the US companies inside Saudi had built their bases, were doing oil extraction, etc. At that time, Italy had dropped bombs, etc., on the US facilities inside Saudi. Then Saudi had a lot of concern about security as well. Saudi wanted US to look after their security because US was a superpower, and Saudi wanted to make his country risk-free and do oil business. So this is its background story. So what happens? That when the Bretton Woods Agreement was signed in 1944, a year later in 1945, the US convinces the Saudi king that they'll help in extracting oil and also help you to provide security. The only thing you will have to do in return for that is that you will have to do whatever oil you sell all over the world. You have to do only one thing, that you have to take all the payments in US dollars and do not accept any other currency. Now, the Saudi who was there easily agrees to this thing because, anyway, there was no alternative nearby. Secondly, even if he had bought it in any other currency, he did not have that much confidence. In the US dollar, the thing is that it can be converted into gold at any time, so the Saudis easily agree to it. One more thing stood in front of the rest of the countries, that if you want oil for your country, then you will not get it in any other currency. It is compulsory to have US dollars, hence you have to have US dollars in your reserves. If you want oil, and the oil was the most powerful product of the modern economy, and after the Saudi deal, the other oil countries also started accepting oil in dollars only because they also had the same issue. There was a challenge, and if Saudi gives such an option in dollar, then it will have an advantage. Then the other Arab oil countries also started selling oil in dollar. What happens after this is that the US pushes itself a little more. It seemed that its dollars, which are spread all over the world, all the countries would come together to convert them into gold. So, what US did was, all the gold that it had, it started printing more currency than the gold they had, and in the international market, the US had more US dollars than gold started floating than it was. Now, what the US did was that there was really very little possibility that people from all the countries would come together and convert the US dollars into gold. But there was a situation when this could happen, that everyone together demands to buy gold by giving US dollars. And that situation was that if the price of gold increases in the gold market outside, then this thing can happen. Like, suppose you have $1. US is saying that in exchange for $1, it will give you 28 grams, i.e., ounce of gold. Whereas in the gold market outside, if you start getting 40 grams or more in exchange for dollars, then what will you do? Buy cheap from the US and sell it at a higher price in the gold market outside. This will benefit everyone a lot. So the US had to take care that the rates of the gold market outside should remain around the US dollar. Otherwise, it would get into big trouble, and this was the reason why the US was forced to buy gold to keep the market prices stable, keep them around what the US dollar is offering, because the price of gold in the gold market fluctuates depending on the demand and supply. If more gold comes into the market, if the demand decreases, gold will become cheaper. And if less gold is left and demand is more, then gold will become expensive. And this fear was very big for US. So US had made a plan for this. It included 8 countries, which were very close to it. Those who had taken many debt from it made a pool of gold of them, and meaning all these 8 countries made a pool of their gold and kept it in one place. And after that, what do they do in London is they start manipulating the demand and supply of the biggest gold market in the world, meaning that if the demand for gold increases, then these people start selling gold in the market. And if the demand decreases, then they start buying gold in the market. They used to give and buy, but their main objective was to keep the dollar rate around and to maintain the demand and supply. But by the year 1967, the US had created a pool of gold, in which some of the countries, when the losses started, these countries got frustrated and came out of this pool. Then the plan of the US also stops working in a way. The US gets stuck in a problem. After this incident, the US was so confused that the US turned the phone inside the UK and, convinced of the Queen of London, took the proclamation and closed down the gold exchange market of London, which means that the whole story of demand and supply has ended. Now no one can buy gold there, and no one could sell it, and at the same time, the gold reserve of the US also started decreasing. See, the gold reserve of the US had reached such a low level by 1960. Along with this, the president of the US became Richard Nixon, had started bullying the other countries a bit, that they should not convert dollars into gold. Then all these incidents were happening, like the London market was closed. After that, Nixon was pressurizing them a bit, that if they did not convert, then this thing backfired on them, and the rest of the countries became insecure, and what they started doing was giving dollars and taking gold instead. So all these things turned out to be a disaster for the US. And when all these things do not work out, on August 15, 1971, President Nixon releases Executive Order Number 11,615, and blaming the international speculation, says that the convertibility of the US dollar into gold means that as of today's date, they will not get gold in exchange for dollar.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
Whole world was shocked. All the trades were taking place in dollars. The debts taken were to be returned in dollars. Oil was coming in dollars. Everyone's reserves were in dollars, and it was a shock for the world to say this. That is why this incident is called Nixon shock. After this incident, the countries did not know what to do. Understand it like this. Some people have signed and distributed checks to the whole world. Some have distributed 10 lakhs. Some have written 5 lakhs. And later it is found that the check is there, but they cannot get it encashed. So now what people are doing is giving. What Saudi had here also reaches to the US, that we are collecting dollars from oil by selling dollar, and now you have done such a thing that now we are not even converting. Can you get the value of the dollar converted into gold now? What is left? So the US told Saudi that there is no need to take tension. Keep selling the oil you are selling in dollars as it is, and the dollars you are getting from selling oil. You invest that dollar in the US. You can buy our resources with the same dollars and get them brought to your country. You invest in our bonds and our companies. We will help you in every way. You are getting US dollars by selling oil will not be bad for you. Keep doing this without any worry, and take the oil in US dollars only. Now Saudi also had a compulsion. There was no solution to this thing, so they agree. Then the dollar that comes from selling oil and the dollar that is left after taking out all the expenses, which these countries invest inside the US, is called petrodollar. You must have heard this word. In the news, this thing was a big victory for the US, because if other countries want oil, then they will have to maintain the US dollar, and the US dollar will remain relevant in the market, and there was no other alternative. Now the decision was taken that oil will be sold only and only in US dollars. There were some Arab leaders who openly protested that we will not accept that oil will be sold only and only in dollars. And whenever such cases have come, the US, being its military superpower, took advantage of it and silenced those voices in different ways. Like in the year 2000, Iraq's President Saddam Hussein had refused to use dollars. Saddam Hussein had started selling oil in euros instead. All the transactions of the nation's oil for food program were started in euros. They collected up to 26 billion euros in exchange for about 3.3 billion barrels of oil. But due to this, Saddam Hussein was overthrown and hanged. After this, Libya's Gaddafi proposed the idea of leaving the dollar and creating a unified African currency. Libya plays a very important role in the global oil market. This thing was considered a big challenge for the US dollar, according to experts. But his country's civil war was started, and Gaddafi was overthrown. If you remember, in December 2015, the emails from Hillary Clinton's private email server were leaked. One of the emails related to this was caught, which was very important for her. The same close attorney Sydney had sent, all the things were written in it, how Gaddafi is using euro instead of US dollar. You pause once and read it. Iran, which at that time had reserves of 126 billion barrels of oil, it had world's almost 10% of oil reserve and the second largest natural reserve. Iran sets up IOB, i.e., Iranian Oil Bourse, in its third development plan 2000 to 2005. In this it was asked to use euro, and that was said because their trade 45% was happening with European countries. So Iran said that we will accept in euro, this will benefit us. But what happened to Iran in future, and what is the situation now? You know that. US has imposed so many sanctions on the whole of Iran. This plan also stopped at the same time. Later, you had already seen the condition of crypto. So see, what I mean to say is that in an unset communication, everyone knew that standing against the dollar means directly standing against the US. Standing against a superpower and a nuclear power, and US had set all these examples. And this is the reason why anyone thinks 10 times before messing with US. Along with this, there was one more thing, which was SWIFT network, through which the dollar used to get further advance. Now what is this SWIFT network? So see, like now when you transfer money from one bank account to another bank account, it is not that a person fills money in the car and goes to another branch to give that money. It is simply digits that move from here to there, and we say that the money has been transferred, and for its settlement we need unique codes like IFSC code and other details. Similarly, when someone has to do an international transaction, then for that also a secure communication channel is needed so that international banks can know from which bank to reflect the money. Earlier, what used to happen was that telex was used. There was an analog system. It was used. And the details of the bank were sent manually, that money is to be transferred from this account to this account. But after this comes SWIFT network. It's simply a secured automated messaging system that tells the international banks that which country's which branch's bank wants to transfer the money to. And when SWIFT sends the message securely, after that, the money is transferred. Understand SWIFT network as, if any country falls out of this network, then it'll not be able to do international transaction. It won't be able to do any transaction. Its foreign funding, etc., all that will stop, import-export will be affected. Even those who make money from YouTube, that money will also not reach them. Removing a country from SWIFT Bank is a kind of dropping a financial nuclear bomb, and the complete control in the system of this SWIFT net is indirectly of the US. There are about 2,400 shareholders in it, and these 2,400 shareholders form 25 boards of directors in which the members are from these countries. Belgium, Canada, France, Germany, all these members live there, but the entire control over the entire system rests with the US in an unset communication. So if the US wants, it can remove any country from this entire system whenever it wants, like Russia. Earlier, they had expelled Iran, due to which there was a huge loss for these two countries. This is such a big thing that if it is imposed on any country overnight, then its economy will come to the ground overnight. All these reasons are that US has weaponized the dollar. US gets a kind of geopolitical advantage due to dollar, which defeated overnight, with the help of the dollar bringing that country's economy to the ground overnight. Actually, what US does is US imposes sanctions. You must have heard many times in the news that US has imposed sanctions on this country or have imposed sanctions on this particular thing. US imposes sanctions in different ways. One is primary sanction and the other is secondary sanction. What does the US do in the primary sanction is it clearly refuses its companies, institutions, and citizens to do business with that particular country. Then the companies of US retreat from those countries, and when US companies do this, along with them, European companies also retreat, and what happens is that the stock market of that particular country falls. Investment stops due to loss. No one invests in the sanctioned countries. The companies of the United States and Europe have a huge influence in the whole world. When they withdraw from any country, then the rest of the countries look at them. Those companies also run away from investing, because when the US imposes sanctions, then it is not known where the matter will stop. It is not a big deal that in future SWIFT may be banned, like they did in the case of Russia. They have banned Russia from SWIFT network. We had just thrown out the Ukraine war that had taken place at this time, and in such cases, even the biggest countries and their companies fall to the ground, because they are not able to sell their goods, and even if the goods are sold, the money is not transferred. Secondly, what does the US does is, it imposes secondary sanctions. Anyone who trades with the country on which the sanction is imposed is also sanctioned. This is called secondary sanction. So what does it mean? That is, the country on which secondary sanctions have been imposed gets isolated from the entire international trade. Its funding stops. Like what happened with Iran, they had imposed secondary sanctions on Iran. India had an advantage in taking oil from Iran. But even after getting profit, India could not buy oil from Iran, whereas later on Iran made it cheaper. The price of oil was being offered cheaply in the market, but even after that, India was not able to buy it. So basically, if you look at it, the fight was between the United States and Iran. The sanctions that were imposed were on Iran, but the loss was to those countries. Those who have to face this whole complex have no meaning. And without doing anything wrong, inflation increases in those countries too. Oil prices increase, and this advantage is available only to the US. If India wants, it can also impose suction and announce that we have imposed sanction on Pakistan, but there is no dependency of rupees in the global market, nor does India have any system like SWIFT network. Right now, UPI is moving forward slowly, but there is still time for that. That's why the impact that happens is that the US sanctions are the highest. The costing of US sanctions in the whole world is very heavy on the people. Just now, when US had imposed sanctions on Russia, so all the countries had retreated, but India still bought oil from Russia. Actually, US has to suffer a little from India because of China. This is because US sees India as a counter to China, hence nothing much happened to India. But if any other country had done this, it would have faced problems. What I mean to say is that the US's economic power, which is more than its military power, creates problems, and if someone tries to weaken this economic power, then their military power comes out, and at present no one has any solution for this thing. But the swift ban imposed by Biden on Russia, on Ukraine, wore in a way experts believe that they are on their feet. It is like throwing an axe because not only Russia has been sanctioned due to this, everyone else has also suffered a lot, and this is the reason why other countries are also looking for alternatives to this particular thing. For the last few months, other countries are also facing this sanction. Being troubled by the dollar, everyone from China, Russia, Argentina, Brazil to South Africa is trying to reduce their dependence on the dollar. It is not possible to give it up completely, but they are trying to reduce it, and this is being discussed in the news. The name has been given as de-dollarization. China reduced its U.S. bonds and sold them currently. Iraq, which is a big oil supplier, said that we will sell oil in yuan. Shanghai Cooperation Organization also made a statement that they will use the local currency. Saudi and China did their first transaction in yuan, due to which U.S. got very upset. Back-to-back meetings were also held in U.S. and Saudi. Russia has also announced that it will reserve the money coming from oil in yuan currency. India and UAE have also made an agreement that we will trade in our currency, but experts believe that it is not possible to outcast U.S. in this manner. This happens every 10 to 15 years when all the countries get excited, but nothing can be done practically. If seen, one is yuan and the other is BRICS shared currency. These two can become an alternative to the dollar and can give competition to it. See Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Together, they have created BRICS. In the next year, if more countries will also join, then in this they have said that by combining all the currencies of BRICS countries, they will create an alternative of $1. Like what happens now, there is an SDR inside the IMF, which contains the currencies. They have weightage, they have points, like the weightage of US dollar is 43. Points are given after looking at import, export, and trade power, and many other things. Such BRICS countries are saying that they have mixed the currencies of all the countries and follow this weightage system. Like, we will create a currency which will be named BRICS currency, and its symbol will be beta. Now, will this be possible or not? So time will tell, but for now, our dependence on the US dollar remains the same, so in the end,